Hey folks, welcome to another very exciting radio episode of CTF Radio. I'm Adam D, and I have with me here, as always, Zardist. Zardist, why don't you say hi?
Hey everybody.
Cool, and why don't you do the honors for me, Zardist? We have two very special guests here that hold a place of very high esteem in our CTF hearts. Why don't you introduce them in your most grandiose style first, and then we can have them actually, maybe properly introduce themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. So in some sense, our guests today don't need an introduction because they are titans in the community. They're inspirational figures without whom we wouldn't be here, right? In a very real way. And they've guided not only the community as a whole, but us in very personal ways, which is super cool. I'm super excited to have this awesome chat with them. And they are Dustin and Vito from Legit BS, who, of course, handed the reins of DEF CON to us, and now we're handing them onwards. So it's a very timely, very cool episode. I'm super excited. Dustin, Vito, do you guys want to introduce yourselves?
Yeah, sure thing. So I'm Vito, part of Legitimate Business Syndicate. I helped run, DEF CON CTF, I guess. I worked a lot on the scoring system for both the quals and the finals games. And following on from that right now, I'm also part of the what we call the mission control team for the Hackasat CTF game in space. And again, for that, I also work on the scoring and some of the infrastructure work.
Oh no, that doesn't mean I have to go into space after I've done DEF CON CTF.
I actually
That's right where they're sending you.
I have not had to go into space. In fact, I have only left Florida like twice for this program, and that was in the before times.
Yes.
And that was, I guess, horizontally, not vertically.
Yeah. Well, I was like sitting vertically because airplanes, but...
That's true. Slight, normal amount of vertical gain.
Yeah, not like on your back in some, like jammed into basically like a Volkswagen Beetle space capsule for like 3 days straight with 3 other guys.
I don't know. William Shatner can do it. I feel like any of us can do it.
That's right. He did do that today.
I hear the toilets are really hard to figure out.
Yeah.
That would be probably my biggest concern.
That's the one thing I remember from that movie Apollo 13 is the one guy like flushes the space toilet and he looks out the window and says, "It's the constellation Urian."
That's what you remember about Apollo 13? Oh my god. So I remember the scene, because I saw this opening day as a kid, was the scene where they dump all the parts out around all the nerds and the engineers, and they're all right, we need to make this thing fit into this thing using only this. And like that little nerd part in me just absolutely loved that scene.
The CO2 filter adapter out of like socks and duct tape. Very much like a team building exercise at work where you have to build like a bridge that holds up soda cans out of paper and masking tape or something. See, that's getting very autobiographical.
I was going to say it's very similar to running DEF CON CTF.
These servers and
shit hits the fan. We've definitely been there, Jan. Shit hits the fan. You're like, oh my god, we only have this stuff. We have to solve this problem as quickly as possible, and you somehow make it work.
Yeah. I mean, that's what we do, right?
Yeah, awesome, cool. Dustin, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yep. Hey everyone, I'm Dustin. If you were at DEF CON during the Legit BS years, you probably would recognize me from running around the DEF CON floor with my hair on fire, trying to make sure everything worked. I took a lot of responsibility for some of the crazier curveballs and the sorts of ridiculous ideations about infrastructure. I didn't really do the DevOps or actually running the infrastructure. We had people far more talented than I actually do that. But as far as hey, wouldn't it be really cool if we did a custom architecture that had 9-bit Middle Indian bytes? That was me, and I'm sorry for it. I was the genesis for that. I'm certainly not the force that made it happen. Once again, far more talented people than I actually put that all together and made it happen. I don't know what else to say.
Perfect.
About
No,
myself.
that's great. And yeah, we won't. We'll use that as a nice teaser for later in when we start digging into what you talked about of the insanity that came out of the legit BS era. Jan, are you prepared to give us a brief history of the DEF CON CTF organizers?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a good, there were the ages shrouded in mystery. I actually brought from my mom's house last weekend a bunch of my old badges, starting from, let's see, DEF CON 9.
This is great
Right
podcast
here.
material, Jan.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I got DEF CON 9. I got DEF CON 10. This was before electronic badges, and at DEF CON 9, as we've talked about in previous episodes, I walked the halls of DEF CON watching these hacking gods hack, and back then, and now. The year to DEF CON iteration conversion's a little tricky, so to say at some point there were just DEF CON goons running the contest, and then the ghetto hackers took over, then Ken Shoto took over, then I started playing with DEF CON, whichever DEF CON was in 2009. I have the badge somewhere in that box, and DD Tech. Stealth organized from the game floor, and there were these. Again, it was my first time competing at DEF CON, and the imposter syndrome was real. Walking around watching all of these people that really looked like badasses, just sitting there hacking away and watching our challenges and our infrastructure as a team that was competing there melt down as they were hacked to shreds and so forth. It was very cool. And I think my first DEF CON, actually, I think my first and my third DEF CON, these crazy kids won that looked pretty cool when they were on stage getting their black badges. And then,
does anybody look not cool on stage getting their black badges?
I'm sure I could handle it, manage to do it somehow. But yeah, you're probably right.
You've looked very uncool on stage before, but that's mainly just
I was sleep deprived.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say.
I feel like Tyler has won so many badges that it's no longer.
That's right. It's like, all right, here you go. Yeah, but anyways, suddenly we show up for our 5th year of DEF CON. That is me on Shellfish back in the day. I show up for my 5th year of DEF CON, and there's a new organizing team, and they are I don't even know how this happened, but like the word spread that these people weren't messing around, and it was like no one knew who they were necessarily, and it was all this legitimate business syndicate.
Well, you knew one thing.
Mm-hmm.
The name was great. That's what I knew.
Yeah, that's right. The name was pretty awesome, and they ran a solid ship. And then I walk out and I think some of these people look vaguely familiar. And that's kind of the story of at least my impression, starting from goons watching ghetto hackers, watching Ken Shoto, competing in DD Tech's DEF CON, and then suddenly these new, the old gods leave, the new gods enter. That was very cool. So that was the lead up for me to the reign of legit BS.
Awesome. So then maybe we could, before we get into the kind of meat of becoming gods, like Jan said, maybe Dustin, you can start us off by talking about, because we like to do this with a lot of people that come on this podcast, because we have a lot of people out there that tell us, hey, I'm really interested to get into security or CTFs. Like, how do I get started? So what was your experience, Dustin, into getting into capture the flag and security?
Yeah, so I think my first encounter with the security community was I think my freshman or sophomore year, my freshman or my second freshman year at USF.
Did you redshirt your first year?
USF stands for You Stay Forever.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, one of my friends from high school passed me a copy of the student newspaper, and it was about one of the professors out there, Jeremy Rasmussen, who was starting a cybersecurity club. And so I showed up at the first meeting of that, and so they kind of set us down and they talked about what DEF CON was and what Capture the Flag was, and like we set a goal at one of those first few meetings that one day we in this club will go and compete in the DEF CON CTF. Like, okay, that sounds interesting. So we built this mythos around it. It's like that was the thing to do, and why wouldn't a group of students who knew nothing about security be able to do that? I think at the end of the first or second meeting, Jeremy put out a thing just to. It was like, go work on this. I think it was Learn Security Online. It was basically a Warbox sort of. There were like 10 challenges you could do for free, and then you had to pay to learn how to be a hacker or whatever silly nonsense it was. And me and so we all took a break and went and did that, and we came back and there at the start of the meeting, like, who did? How many of y'all did? Got past level 1, bunch of people. Level 2 got smaller. And, it turned out there were 2 of us, myself and Kenny, who just did all the free challenges. That was really like, okay, this is cool and interesting, and I think was the beginning of the end for me as far as deciding that this stuff was cool and worth skipping classes.
So you got hooked.
And, oh yeah, I got hooked hard.
Awesome. That's amazing. Very cool. Vito, what about you?
So actually, Dustin and I were in the USF White Hatters Club together for most of Dustin's time there, and for me, kind of the formative experience was towards the middle of the fall semester. Jeremy had introduced us to the UCSB's ICTF, their academic CTF, and we were trying to decide if we should compete or not, or if we should wait until we got better. And I think there was a push, and I don't know whose it was, that we should just compete, because if we don't compete, we won't know if we're good enough. So,
brilliant.
We just kind of jumped in. We didn't do, as a team, we didn't do super well. There were a few of us that were consistently able to, script the scoring of points by, solving like 2 challenges. So Dustin, do you remember if we were in the, right at the top 2/3?
I don't.
Okay,
I don't.
yeah.
Do you know roughly what year that is, maybe?
That would have been 2005.
It was the spam year.
Oh, 2005. Okay, wow.
That's
Yeah.
a very early ICTF.
Yeah.
So
It's like
yeah,
when
we
it just started into the international part of ICTF.
Yeah. So the aforementioned Kenny and I, we'd scored some points. We, were asked, that January if we had jobs lined up for after graduation. And, somehow managed to turn that into, jobs after that. But that summer, we, as a club, we tried to qualify for DEF CON CTF and did not. We went to DEF CON anyways and did the, I think it was called the amateur CTF back then, and actually won that one, which was really, really impressive, really, really fun to see, Vegas. Kind of an incredible feeling to go through the CTF room and see all the teams that, just disassembled us in quals. And, looking, because this was at the Riviera where they had, the main floor with all the normal people, and then there were skyboxes where most of Conchoto was actually had their servers and were running the game from. And
That's
just going
cool.
in there and imagining how cool it would be to be elite enough to even compete in that game, and just not even imagining that we would be able to, run it someday.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I remember walking down the strip at the end of that DEF CON, talking to Jambalaya, and I was saying, hey, that Vizzy guy, he's so cool. He's just very confident, and can you imagine knowing a third of what he knows? That man was there. The attitude Conchoto had when they ran it was very cool and collected, and Like they knew exactly what was going on at all times, and I think that was one of the big inspirations for us when, or at least something I thought was important and wanted to bring forward for us is like we need to be on top of it, cool, collected, like not cocky, just right. And try to treat our players with respect, and things can get stressful and everything, but at the end of the day, these people are giving up their DEF CON to play our silly little game. So I very much wanted to emulate the sort of Kenshoto, cool, collected, and knew everything that was going on the network at all times.
Awesome. That's great. So then, was this your first time at the DEF CON conference, or had you been before that time?
For me, '06 was my first.
Wow.
Yeah, same.
That's cool. So you won the amateur CTF, and got to marvel at, like Jan said, the gods of the CTF room, including the players and the organizers. That's amazing. So then, and I think Jan, you basically have a similar experience with, going to DEF CON and seeing. I've only been to DEF CON to play CTF, so my experience is a little bit different. But yeah, Jan, do you want to talk briefly about your experience?
Yeah. I mean, it's like you guys said, it's super inspiring. It can be also super kind of what's the term I'm looking for? My mind's drawing a blank. Intimidating.
Yeah.
It can be super intimidating to see just how incredible these hackers are. It's easy to forget that, there's a lot of different directions that people can get very, very deep in. And, you too can be incredible in a very, specific way or a large set of ways. But it's easy to forget that when you're looking at this live. I remember actually my one experience that was awesome that I really treasure is in the first year of Legit BS, actually, which is, basically something melted down, right? I don't remember what it was, but there was a network issue. And right at that time, we ran into some other stupid problem on our end. And I walked up to the organizer table, and Vito, you were there, like, furiously trying to figure out what's wrong. And I said, "Hey, do you have a second?" And you look at me like, "Fuck off." and I was like, "Wow, this guy's busy." And you came by and you said, "Hey, I'm sorry, I kind of dismissed you like that, and things are really melting down." But it's very, very easy to be inspired even in those situations, right? Like Dustin said, Kenshoto always seemed like they were on top of things. And I'm sure that they were extraordinarily capable. But knowing how internally things were going for us sometimes when externally things looked perfect, there's a lot of... it's I think surprisingly doable for people that aren't gods to look like hacking gods to other people. And I think that's kind of a very important thing to keep in mind as you guys idolize Kenshoto, re-idolize you. Kenshoto probably idolizes ghetto hackers and so on, right? It's those kind of, it's a chain of inspiration. I think that's pretty important.
I was going to say a chain of idolatry, but whatever. I think inspiration sounds better. Awesome. Yeah. Cool. So can you then take us through your story going forward? So this was your first time at DEF CON CTF. So then when was the first time that you actually made it to play in DEF CON CTF?
So we actually qualified the very next year for 2007.
Amazing.
We, and by we, I mean, Dustin and Salir and a lot of the other team members really leveled up over the, 9 months between finals and next year's quals. And we squeaked in, and, we can definitely credit the trivia category for a lot of that. but yeah, we squeaked in and actually made it to Vegas to play the next year, and I think we got 7th out of 8.
Yeah, we absolutely did not belong here.
Yeah,
Hey, somebody's
and
got to get 7th. All right, it happens.
well, most of our points had come from, I think, Jimbo sneaking into the Kenshoto server suite after hours and leaving a sticky note on one of the hard drives saying, like 500 points to 40 Thieves.
Wow.
I think also that year they accidentally locked their liquor cabinet, and Jimbo also was able to pick the lock when I think some of the people from like LPCon were unable to pick it, and Jimbo had some crazy like MacGyver ass hotel key and paper clips and hopes and dreams, and got the liquor cabinet back open for the skybox party. So I think we may have gotten some unofficial points for that as well. But
That's awesome.
I don't think we got any points for smashing any stacks in here.
Hey, you weren't last. That's a good place to be in.
It's also actually it's important to note that these old days of CTF, they were much less regimented than CTF is today, right? So there were years of DEF CON CTF where you brought up a solution and it would be judged and you would be given some variable amount of points based on how cool it is, right? I've never competed in that, but this is something along those lines, right? I heard crazy stories from some teams, maybe it was you guys of back in the day, like actually carrying out significant social engineering attacks against competitors to get ahead, which is pretty cool stuff.
Well, I think in 2007 there was actually a discussion happening about that at one of the captains' meetings, where I feel like one team may have been talking about like physical intimidation or something like that, and it was kind of it was my first year, so I don't know if it was a big turning point, but it definitely, in retrospect, feels like it could have been one, I guess.
Yeah,
it's very weird. There seem to be a few very vocal groups. There are people who believe very strongly that CTF is a hacking competition, and therefore there are no rules, inclusive of like wearing razor blades in their shoes to cut the wires that we run to put everybody up. It's like, yeah, I mean, kind of, but like that cost us money. That's ours, and it'd be in the air except for we're in this shitty little hotel that we get maybe 48 hours to do the setup. The best we can do is tape everything down. Like, the fact that we didn't battle harden the Ethernet cable is not us failing to conceptualize that as an attack, but us just assuming you wouldn't be a fucking dick about everything, Chris. And then you've got people who are very like, almost a very sterile view. I don't mean that offensively, but I feel like the order CTFs moved to this more sterile, like, you don't even really get a shell, and like when we hosted and we took root away from everybody, but you still had a shell, people lost their minds. Like, how could we ever compete in this if we don't have root? This is ridiculous, and we hate it. And you're changing, this game that we used to love. We're like, okay, whatever. Sorry, this is the game. Play it or go take a break for a few years. We're not hosting forever. But then, it's interesting to see the evolution of people who think cutting network cables should be allowed. Us who are like, everything's allowed except for no root and, don't shoot people. And you guys who are like, no shells. Good luck. Have fun.
No machines even. I mean, no. Yeah. Like.
Oh yeah. How much? I apologize that I'm not a regular listener to your podcast. How much of your infrastructure stuff have you talked about publicly?
Not much yet, actually. We plan on recording an episode hopefully soon with our infrastructure people so that we can dive into it and also release it open source.
But we're happy to. I mean, nothing's off limits.
At a high level, we go ahead, Dustin.
As I understand it, you guys effectively didn't have real-time service polls. Like, when someone submitted a patch, you would run your volley of tests on it immediately, and if they survived, you did not service poll the binary ever again. Which is wild to me.
Yeah, it was definitely
It was a conscious choice.
yes, a conscious and internally.
Yeah.
I don't know how you'd make that choice accidentally.
It was an internally long debated choice.
We had some features that were more bugs or unimplemented things that happened to
Some other
just
things,
be-
yeah. But this
not
was an actual intentional choice, and it was specifically kind of trying to figure out a good balance between streamlining the game so that you don't have to go back and like figure out why is every 3 rounds my service down, this sort of thing.
Yeah, or like
Versus,
I
of
think
course-
that's from our experience running ICTF. Is ICTF was very much the traditional. Hey, you have attack points, defense points, and SLA points, and if your thing doesn't, but we knew from that experience, like, and from us running it, seeing that scoreboard full of green lights that say consistently green for hundreds of ticks or rounds, just it almost never happened consistently throughout the game, and so. Yeah, I think that it was in general, a conscious decision to say, okay, what if it was kind of like a what if scenario of like, okay, what if we didn't do service polling? Then what would the game look like, right?
We tried it that first year, and other than some implementation issues, the teams actually, I think, along with this evolution of CTF, like you said, to a more sterile perspective, which might not be a good thing. I can definitely see arguments about that for some definition of good. There's also kind of a sportsmanship understanding. So we did see some abuses of that, but shockingly few. With like 1 or 2 high-profile exceptions that mostly turned out to be
People not understanding those rules.
yeah,
basically.
kind of, let's say, semi-accidental.
Yeah.
So I think getting rid of the polling every round would have definitely saved me a lot of frustration during the contest, because every time I was, heads down on the keyboard or like just stressing out about something, it was because the pollers were taking longer than we wanted rounds to take.
Yeah,
That's
And that was
exactly
our-
what we had with ICTF. 100%.
yeah, that was our ICTF experience
Yeah.
over and over and over. And like you run into every single thing. Like at one point, it was the speed of launching processes on Linux, like literally Python startup cost. It was just insane.
Yeah, I think that
Yeah, I liked having the polls take place every round though, because like in the less sterile version, we expected and we saw that
Exactly, yeah.
teams were getting access to people's boxes and having persistent access, across polling rounds, and so oftentimes they would launch processes or things that would throw off the behavior of the service, and so we wanted to allow that interactivity. We considered, there's the reverse engineering part of the game, there's the exploitation part of the game, there's the service defense part of the game, but then it was just like the box hygiene and defense part of the game, and I've yet to come up with a way to have that as a characteristic of the game without also having polls take place through the duration.
I think
of
the
game.
only.
And I
the
think
only-
also
go ahead, Vito.
I think getting rid of pollers would also get rid of what I think was probably our like my favorite service to think about for sure. That was Salir's Rubik's in our last year, where it was basically like you solve a Rubik's cube and your solve steps get executed as shellcode, and there was a place in the binary for teams to patch it to say this sequence of moves isn't allowed. And the stretch goal would have been if some team implemented a clemency emulator in clemency so they could figure out if a given set of steps would leak the flag. and they didn't go that far, but it was interesting to see a team would start forbidding a certain sequence of steps that could be part of a valid solve. So Salir would have a polar update that we'd push out the next round. Then all of a sudden it's like, well, you've got a different steps this round. You have to adapt your shellcode to... Or, one team will be adapting their shellcode to not get hit by another team's filter and then make that team update their filter at the same time this team's still on their shellcode. Just a brilliant play, and hearing some of the commentary from players afterwards that it felt like it was actually a head-to-head contest.
Yes.
I don't know how that would work without polling, but
Yeah,
there's probably a lot of research to be done in that direction.
Yeah, we had pollers. Like, for the most part, we did it pre-computed. I think in our first year, we adapted to what we were seeing in the game, but that started to feel like, we could unjustly influence the game by saying, oh, well, PPP did this and they just won, so we're going to mess with their patch specifically. But which we didn't do consciously, at least. Anyway, so after that year, we had we had services written, and we're like, here are the ways we think they could patch it cheap and easy, and we're going to write a poller to check for that. And we're going to introduce that poller 6 hours into the game as sort of like we tried to design the game so that we limited the team size, which was super popular, by the way, and we tried to make sure that there was enough work available for the limited team size to have some backfill and whatnot. But then we very deliberately had these sort of pop-up crises that we figured, okay, so you're going to have this person who understands the service. They're going to write an exploit, maybe they're going to write a patch for it. They're going to go off and work on something else. And before they finish that, they're going to be needed on this unless they've taken very good notes and found a way to pass it off to someone else. And so that was a deliberate decision to try to, mess with the game a little bit, but still have...
So would we be able to trace the genealogy of kind of that, throwing up a new crisis to the CCDC model of competition, where you basically run an IT office, and you have to respond to these business demands?
I think that's where the concept came from, but obviously we weren't oh, you have to install Apache now, and we're gonna.
You have to discover that DNS is UDP.
Yeah.
It wasn't your year that the CCDC winners were invited to DEF CON, right? That was DD Tech's last year. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, but they by then they knew about DNS and UDP.
Well, that's another USF White Hatters lore.
Oh yeah, nice. Yeah, it's definitely a lot of interesting trailers. We tried to implement. A comment on the head-to-head aspect. I think it was your last year with Clemency. Clemency still had open patching, right? Did it?
In its evaluation?
Yeah, exactly. So patches were open. That, to me, there was one of my top experiences in CTF where I remember, I don't remember which challenge this was, but there was, someone was exploiting us. And we understood the bug, but we didn't understand the proper way of patching it. And so I made a chump patch. I moved some stack off. I don't remember. I grew a stack frame. And we deployed that patch, and for a couple of rounds, all was well. And then we're getting exploited again, and by the same team, and or at least by something that looked like the same exploit, just fixed for the offset. And then I chump patched it again, just changed it to a different offset. Worked for 2 rounds, exploit again. I changed the offset again. This time, almost immediate fix, right? So then I got more creative, and until we actually figured out how to patch it properly, I had this head-to-head battle with who turned out to be an RPI sec student of just batch and bypass. It was one of the coolest experiences I had in CTF because I felt that there was a mind at the other end of the connection that was, and this was awesome. So I totally agree with you, and it was awesome actually to meet this person at the after party. I was just describing the event, and he's like, "Oh, it was me! It was me!"
and such a blessed movie hacker experience where even though they're in the same room, you're imagining them in a leather jacket, and rollerblades in the Vegas heat,
That's right.
Twirling around and doing little pirouettes while they, eventually go, full Beavis on the keyboard for a few seconds to. Adapt to the stack offset.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's oh man, it was so cool, and that head-to-head, it kind of bums me out that we I can see what you're saying. We lost a little bit of that in adaptive polling. And
especially without shell access to your machine, I think that's the other thing that you missed that sysadmin component of securing your box and making sure there wasn't anybody else on it and cleaning up any whatever all that stuff.
Yeah, exactly. There's definitely something to be said for both types of operation. I think what we were trying to prevent with
our own strategies.
Yeah, exactly. Basically, much of our hosting philosophy was determined by shitty ways we approached CTF when we were playing, right? Like generic patches we tried to fight and Superman defenses by the lack of shell access, but also through the strict byte limits on patching. So you couldn't like reflow binaries, stuff like that.
I think the last one I want to bring up is another super popular decision I made. Jordan still gives me shit about it occasionally. Is we had a service called Eliza. It was like a space trading game that Sergoon wrote, I believe. And right, you had an inventory. It had to have a certain number. You had to go trade, and your shellcode was based on the quantity and items you had in your inventory. And it was just an overflow on how many items you could put in your list or in your inventory, I think. And we had a service poller that would check for an off by one that didn't lead to code execution, but was incorrect. And like, I was very hard on. I was like, no, this is going to be a thing. Like, we have, anyone who's worked at any megacorp has seen, you have to visit this webpage in IE11 because it depends on some broken behavior in IE11 that is technically incorrect, but someone's built an application around it. I was like, we're writing a poller, and the poller will technically corrupt memory, but it won't corrupt enough memory to get code execution to capture the flag. And we are going to poll that they do allow that bound to be exceeded, but they don't allow code execution. I still stand by that being a interesting and relevant thing. Like, the software we all depend on has bugs, and some people build their platform dependent on the behavior of those bugs. And I think that was, something that was kind of realistic, but also something that we needed live polling, and they needed to see feedback. Because that was another one of those pollers where we rolled out that change hours into the competition, and then all of a sudden their perfectly patched services were just failing SLA. Like, what the hell? And
load-bearing bug.
That's great.
That's a good term. Yeah. It's and this ability to roll out patching and changing polling. I mean, we kind of suffered a little bit with that because we had planned patching in many of our challenges where we said, okay, we're going to release stage 1. And then after...
we didn't say it. We just did.
We didn't say it. But the, for example, the parallel AF, that was the final. Yeah. So for parallel AF, we were stage 1 had a backdoor. It was a reversing challenge, and then stage 2 removed that backdoor, and then it was a opponing challenge. And you even had a stage 3, right?
We had a stage 3 that we didn't even reach.
That we didn't even reach. Yeah.
We didn't think through. We also had flag limits, and we didn't. Well, the big thing we learned from that was actually communicating to the players in advance. Hey, there's going to be these 3 stages, and we're going to change things, at whatever the flag limit was. So stage 1 will last for 100 flags, and stage 2 will last for 500 flags, or whatever it is. So that way they could predict and know, and it's not just that this, But then, it kind of goes back to the fairness thing, right? It's not like, hey, we're changing it because Team X has exploited, the flags for 100 rounds, and we want to make it more difficult for them, right?
But every time we would deploy this patch, people would have to go through the, one-time patch checking procedure, and of course it would fail if they redeployed, and it was, I think there was some user experience stuff that is tricky to get when you take on so much of the management, right? That people could do if they had shell access. Actually, I want to get us diverted a little bit to we're talking about hosting. The game has started. You're there. Things are melting down. You're adapting, et cetera, et cetera. What about beforehand, right? Because this is people see us as organizers on stage, either panicking or looking super cool like Kenshoto or whatnot. But no one sees what happens the day before, 2 days before DEF CON, right?
Or 9 months before.
Yeah, exactly. So your We talked about our experiences on previous versions of the podcast, right? I think one of my favorites is I think was it the day or 2 nights before DEF CON was set to begin. We walk into the CTF room and every team has 1 table and 2 chairs.
Oh, that was our first year, and that was because
yeah.
Dustin told you could just go walk in, and he took you back there to go look at the room.
That's right. Dustin, you actually saved us there. We would have showed up Thursday morning to 1 table and 2 chairs, or Friday morning. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, you texted me.
I think I still have the picture I sent you.
Yes. Is this what you guys want?
Oh man! So
Yeah.
what was it like for you that first year, right? Figuring out how to liaise with a giant conference and so forth.
Hard.
And that's one of the many things where we owe Jimbo a ton for making the game actually happen, because he did so much of the work interfacing with the DEF CON, with what's the name of the company that does all the set, or not set design, but conference set, not Signature.
Encore.
Yeah, he interfaced with Encore a lot. There was, I think, the first year when we were in the Rio, he was the one who would just, if the projector was beefed, he would climb up those extremely scary gantries I would not climb up.
Wow.
Just to, fix it. Just a lot of stuff happened because of him, and it's difficult for, I guess, me to appreciate a lot of that work because it was invisible to me.
Yeah, the first year I decided to go out 3 days before the con and just, they run conferences all year, and so I would camp out the conference and wait for the conference that preceded DEF CON to, get out of the way, and then just, turns out a black button-up and long black jeans, if you walk like you know where you're going, people generally don't ask you anything.
Bavarian fire drill.
And it was very much the first year we got out there. I don't even think it was just the first year. I think every year we went, it was the same experience. We coordinated with the DEF CON staff and the hotel staff about what we wanted, and, got it approved for fire code and all these, things that are required to have a space like that with the number of people that DEF CON anticipates are going to go through it. And, everything was great. And then you show up out there and, it's not as advertised. And so it's a lot of chasing down the organizers, chasing down the goons. It's always 2 or 3 days of trying to find the right goons when you get out there, because, just walking up to a random goon who you don't know, hey, I'm with the CTF and I need to get back there, and, can you put me in touch with the floor team for DEF CON this year, because we've got all these problems. Yeah, whatever, go fuck off, buddy. Social engineering CTFs over there. Yeah, it's more challenging than I expected it to be. And I think the bulk of my time up into the lead up of, starting the CTFs was tracking down hotel people and DEF CON people and explain no, this is CTF. We need to let people in an hour before the floor opens.
Yeah. And let them out
have these tokens
at some time where they have time to pack up their gear.
Right. Yeah. And we would go do a dry run setup, right? Because we didn't have cloud infrastructure. We wheeled our infrastructure down every year because we had all sorts of weird computers that we couldn't rent in the cloud back then. And we would do a dress rehearsal at least the night before, run everything, plug into everybody's spot at the tables, make sure they come up with the right IP address and all that fun stuff. And that was generally a 16 to 18 hour day before we do the kickoff. And then we unplug everything, wheel it back up, and then I think before start, we were down 4 or 5 hours before startup every morning, doing a faster version of the same checks. But, the night before was always the important one, because it was what got broken on the plane and who can go to Fry's to fix it, sorts of things.
Oh my God! Speaking of, Jan, do you want to tell that insane story about the cable our first year?
So we show up our first year, and there's tons of fires on every.
I think it's on
level.
Wednesday is when we showed up. There's a lot of stories
we
there.
show
But
up
there's
on
one.
Wednesday, yeah, which was way
was
too
a
late,
mistake.
Obviously, every year after that, except for DEF CON safe mode, of course, we showed up over a week before, right? So
At least in
I think-
Vegas. We were
yeah,
getting
this year we
Airbnb
show
and-
up the Wednesday before DEF CON. I
Yeah,
think.
yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah, like we rented
I
a house.
think
and
even in 2016 when we had like a lot of weird CGC stuff was going on too. I think we only showed up the Monday before, right, Dustin?
That sounds
And I
right.
remember
I was always out a day or two earlier than everyone else.
that's because you guys are
Just to find out, like, I forgot this. Someone go talk to my girlfriend at the time to get this packed in her luggage, so we've got it. Someone go pick this up. Oh shit, DEF CON said they don't have cables. Somebody bring a bunch of cables, sorts of shit.
Yeah. See, you could come out that late because you're hacking gods. See?
No, it's. I think part of it was actually a lot of staggered arrival and a lot of people who were just good at getting stuff done. Like the magic of staggered arrival means that you're not like one and done. If you left something at home, like one year I left my sunglasses at my parents' house, and somebody from our team was in town and was able to go by on their way to the airport and pick them up.
That's
Nice.
great. That's great. Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, so our first year we arrived on Wednesday, and the CTF started on Thursday. And one of the many things that Friday. Yeah. Anyway, so one of the many things that went wrong was we needed some sort of cable for our server. One of our servers in our server rack that we didn't have. We just didn't bring this cable.
There's a power, like one of the power cables, but it was
power
one
cable,
of the weird adapter one, not the normal
square
one that's
ones.
on the back. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's some high gauge one. I don't remember. Whatever. It was shaped differently, and the normal ones didn't fit no matter how much we tried. And we're sitting there trying to figure out what to do. Like, are we going to go to Fry's? And as we're sitting there, Null Pointer, Will Robertson, arrives and walks in with his luggage. And we're like, Will, we're going to have to go to Fry's Electronics and pick up this cable. I don't know. Hopefully they have it. And he's like, what cable? We're like, oh, it's just some special server cable. It's like, oh, I have it. And he just pulls it out of
No,
his
not
luggage.
only did he said he had it, he's like, oh, blah, 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 dash B 42,
Exactly.
whatever. Yeah, I have it right here in my bag.
No, it's crazy. Well, what else did he brought like 87 different computers and like.
Oh, that was the
it
next
just-
year, but yes, he brought
Yeah, it was
a
insane.
bunch of different Raspberry Pi. We were trying to do a hardware thing that didn't
Yeah.
end up making it, but yeah.
Yeah, that was wild. And actually, one of the reasons it didn't end up making it was because we couldn't figure out a way to kind of bolt on SLA after the fact to our front-loaded SLA checks. Like he had a challenge design that would require it. So it's another kind of thing to harken back. All right. Anyways, to keep us on track, so we have.
So we heard about logistics, maybe
Yeah.
infra. We can hear about the first year getting that infra together, Vito.
So I think a lot of that first year infrastructure, especially for finals, came together. That was something we were starting to plan around quals, right, Dustin? I think a lot of it got put together.
Sorry, infrastructure like
Game infrastructure.
the scoring infrastructure and game infrastructure, or
Okay.
like the team boxes. Which are we talking
All of the above is what I'm interested in, so whatever you can talk about.
The team boxes that year were basically, you've probably seen the pictures, a bunch of O-droids in like a Dell, server chassis, so that it's like, oh no, it's all running on this Dell. We definitely don't have 20 ARM boxes in here. A lot of the scoring infrastructure was actually like, and this. God, I hope this doesn't sound too much like hubris. Feels very normal to me somehow. Like it's all Rails apps and Postgres, and I hit up enter on a script that actually like ticks the rounds. It
what?
checks the time. So I didn't hit up enter like every round, but it would say okay there's a rounds table in the database, and it basically say okay it's currently this round because it doesn't have a ended at timestamp. So it needs to end at, started at plus 5 minutes. we, the pollers have already run, so we don't need to do that. I just need to count down till the next round. And then the next round, it would start, it'd update the database and say, okay, I need to fire the pollers. I'm assuming they're going to take about 4 minutes total, so I need to fire them right away. It counts all this time. And then, it builds up this, average of how long the pollers take, so it can time them at a different time every round. But it was one of those things where it felt like really janky at the beginning, writing. It's like, no, there's got to be a 12-factor, Heroku, big rail shop way to do this. But then I kind of just realized it's like, no, it's all just going to be stuff that runs a script and checks the time a lot.
That's actually sounds almost identical to the game bot. So we basically had I went to a kind of, I call it like a spokes model, where we have just a bunch of little components that all talk to all talk to a central database, but they don't talk. It's not a microservice because they don't talk to each other. They only talk through the database API, and they just put stuff in, so it's all polling based. But yeah, that's exactly what our game bot does. The only thing it does is actually that component just ticks the game. It just waits and calculates, okay, what time, how long do I need to sleep before the next tick should be? And based on data from the database that we can update to change the tick time dynamically. But yeah, that's exactly, and it's very, very similar to the stuff we did for ICTF for sure.
It was kind of surprising to me how similar, and granted, Vito took it way further and made it way better than, what we used to use. But if you're a team who plays CTF and you have some sort of exploit throwing infrastructure, it's the same thing. At the end of the day, you're running scripts executed or written by some author, and they've got some plug-in to your thing to say service up, service down, service up, but invalid data. And it looks a lot like, the pre-exploit, making sure you're going to throw the exploit and team selection for throwing exploit sorts of stuff that was in a lot of the, exploit bots that I had in different iterations of teams when I'd competed.
And going into some more deep lore, that's something that we had at the USF White Hatters, 15 years ago, where we had we tried to run a CTF one year. It went very badly, but we learned a lot and didn't try to organize another CTF for 6 years after that. I think we hosted it literally April 20th, 2007. And yeah, it was a kind of a disaster,
CTF,
but
isn't that what that?
I don't. Yeah, not super related to Blaze, but from that we kind of what fell out of that was something I think we called it Pwnbot or something that we were using to automatically score or try to automatically score when we played CTFs.
Yeah. And how far you went from that, Dustin, to manually typing in flags for shellfish in this in DEF CON 29 CTF finals?
I mean,
hey, you got to get the points. I agree. I don't.
Yeah. So that's the. I think the year I won with Samurai, that was my biggest contribution. I was finding exploits or finding vulnerabilities and writing exploits, and had done a few of those, but we had some people who were incredibly frustrated with, but still believing in the exploit throwing framework and everything well into the middle of the competition. And at one point, me and another one of the reversers was there's glory in finding vulnerabilities and writing exploits, but there's victory in submitting flags. And so me and another very, very talented exploiter stopped spending time with IDA, and we did the up arrow thing. We're no, we can't even try to put a dumb wrapper around it because the automation has put us in the position we're in. We need to and so I spent hours even that year, and we won for it. But I think that was a big lesson when I was playing, was after our first year when we won, we were okay, we're going to come back and have all this automation and it's going to be great. And then we get out there and all of our automation falls apart, and we've got a bunch of people who are discouraged, and then a bunch of people who are I'm 20 minutes and I'll have it fixed. And, midway through day 2, it's no, you're super talented and we need you to do other things. sunk cost fallacy sucks.
Yeah.
Sounds very familiar. Jan, would you like to briefly describe? Well, whose year was that? Do you remember?
Are you talking to me or Dustin?
No, Jan. Jan.
It was 2013, I believe, or maybe even 2012, that I started writing shellfishes. We realized that we had no visibility onto the network, and everyone, of course, wanted to just open up IDA and
CTF.
freaking just create exploits. And I was one of our people that would do that, but I realized, okay, we need to back up. We need to write a dumbass wrap around TCP dump and stuff, and just mirror attacks, and that got us over half our points that year.
But then the next year, you spent all summer improving that framework, and then we showed up.
All of DEF CON fixing it.
Yeah, because it was IPv6 was the network that year. I don't know if that was your guys' year.
I think you guys fucked us over that time. No, was it? No, it wasn't you guys yet.
Yeah, maybe? And that whole network defense system completely failed, and Jan literally spent the first, half a day to a day trying to fix it, and it was time he should have been spent, finding
it's very easy to sink time in, and again, like a lot of our design decisions, initially delaying PCAPs and later bringing up stealth ports was a way to balance that, the time sync. One of the things that I wanted to do that we never really got to implement is get rid of rounds, right? So can you, instead of rounds, just say, hey, I exploited the service at this point. I don't have to do it again unless they patch it. Right? I've proven that it's exploitable here.
That's right.
And then you don't even need a freaking attack bot or whatever. You run your thing. It spits out 16 flags or 15, however many teams you're attacking. You paste that into a form, and you're done until they patch. Right.
I think that's definitely interesting, and I've spent some time, not like a lot of time, trying to figure out how that would work scoring wise. Mm-hmm. But I worry that misses a lot of the interactivity of it. Like if you're only throwing once, does the attacking team get more than one chance to see the proof vulnerability come in? Do they get, if they know that's like, oh yeah, they like this packet definitely contains malicious traffic. We don't need to sort through the regular noise.
Yeah.
I think if I were going to visit running a CTF again, I would want to be thinking about how to add more pressure to writing better exploits. I feel like that doesn't get a lot of attention, and I feel like one throw kind of trivializes it. Like you're missing some of the craftsmanship of a good exploit. Like I think there's a whole dimension of the game of being able to survive scrutiny from skilled people in your exploit, and being able to write payloads that people can't just okay, yeah, this is the start of the shellcode, or this is the start of the ROB chain, and this is the IP address for the connect back, so we're going to change it to ours and then reflect the exploit back. And, I think there's a lot of interesting theory crafting to do with that, and I haven't come up with a good way to make that important. Yeah. I feel like I had tried to make it important, but a lot of teams just were like, oh, we'll just throw a bunch of bullshit on the wire instead of, hide in the noise, which certainly has its place, but I wish I could come up with a way to kind of push the elegance of that. I have a few ideas, but...
Yeah, we started to see, I think, a little bit of that with the stealth ports, where this way the teams could kind of get rewarded for, just getting an exploit that works, launching it against everybody on the stealth port so they know it's not going to be stolen and used against them. And then they could do that for half points until they had an exploit that they were pretty confident would be very difficult to reverse engineer. Or from a game theory perspective, the game changed in some way that then caused them to flip and have to go on open port because somebody else went on open port and leaked the exploit. So now they need to do it before other people do to get those points.
Yeah,
it's fascinating.
Yeah, that was, I think, the closest we came to encouraging stealthy exploitation, is having, ironically, an option where they don't have to worry about stealthy exploitation if they're okay with half points. right? and then we saw, yeah, like you said, we saw refined exploits that were very hard to replay being launched on open channels, as opposed to shitty exploits that were super easy to notice and so forth.
Yeah, which is what we had. I mean, we, as Shelf, part of Jan's network defense system would
just automatically.
We had a web interface that would like automatically flag PCAPs if they contained the flag or XORed versions of the flag. There were all kinds of like filters and stuff that you could then look at, and then if you even, and then I can't remember if it did automatically, but I remember one year there was, because I'm a web guy, so when I would do DEF CON CTF, I would do this kind of stuff. That's the only way I could be useful.
You're an arcane architecture guy now.
Especially when, and which is so funny because one year I remember going and everything was in ARM, and maybe it was your first year, and I was like, fuck this, I'm so old, I'm not going to learn a new architecture. And so I was just on like network defense and that kind of stuff. But anyways, so Jan had this feature where you could just drop the PCAP into a folder, and then it would automatically just replay that traffic at every single team, and anything that looked like a flag would just get submitted to the organizers. And we got, like, what was it? Like some insanity of like 3/4 of our points were from like replaying other traffic that was just existing in the network.
It was real sad.
Yeah. I think it was one service that we exploited ourselves. Like, I think
that year, yeah. Because the thing is, usually it was more, but that was a function of not having a good network visibility, right? And so if you once you have good network visibility, you're kind of starting to harm your own top hackers because they get frustrated because you scoop them with exploits you find off the wire. Yeah, it's interesting emergent behavior of playing an attack defense CTF.
Yeah, one of the things I've been thinking about is, like, would a IDS run by the organizers kind of cause that evolution to occur? Like, not only do you have to compete with the detection capabilities of the other team, but if the organizers themselves are like, yeah, if you just run stock Metasploit shellcode or, stuff off of malware, we're gonna just catch it. So, no. And, even having, like, penalties for that, I think that could be an interesting way to try to push some more robust exploits.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting take on it, because the things that we always think about is when we make some changes, especially at the game theoretical level, like with stealth ports, the top teams will figure that out and will, that'll probably be the difference maker. But the bottom, like 5 teams, I mean, part of the reason why they're in the bottom is because they don't like understand the game at that level, and so it doesn't really influence their behavior. And that's definitely what we saw. So that's an interesting point. I don't think we've actually thought of. We kind of hoped that the teams, like, we would create an environment such that the teams would do what we wanted, but it doesn't always work out with all of the teams.
Yeah. I've one of the ML challenges I never had time to write was basically an auto training IDS, where there was some trivial bug that you could exploit, but every exploitation attempt refined the IDS based on whether it's successful or not. Right. That idea is easy to say but hard to get right, and I never really got to spend enough time to make it right.
Yeah, I think the only thing I had that I played, one of the HICON CTF finals that I played, there was a web challenge where the web app was one of the most insanely vulnerable web apps you've ever seen. And what you would do was upload some C code that they would compile, and that would be basically a filter on like an IDS on everything going through. And they also had open patching with the ability to literally just in the interface say, I want to deploy this team's patch. And so it was kind of became this really interesting game of reversing people's patches, because of course they put backdoors in the patch because when other people stole them. And so trying to figure those out and trying to still exploit people was pretty cool.
That was something.
It sounds exactly like the CGC setup. Like, you had your firewall rules, but I believe they were C scripts to do some sort of packet.
No, the IDS rules, they were not written in C. I remember writing a parser for them in Erlang so we could validate them on the website instead of having to shell out to the Golang.
Regex, right? Like pseudo regex.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. They were basically the polar language, weren't they?
Maybe. No, because the polar language was XML. And
They
then
were
Python
something.
too. Yeah. If you look for the Erlang package CGC IDS, I think you'll find the parser code I wrote for it.
And then the step 1 is learn Erlang, and then you can understand the parsing code.
Erlang's easy.
Erlang, man. That's what RabbitMQ was written in?
Yeah.
Yeah. I've had so many problems with Erlang. Anyways. So, we talked
Just
about...
don't reassign variables.
Yeah, exactly. We talked about your first year. What about your second year? What's different there?
In terms of hosting, you're saying?
Yeah.
So for us, I think some of the biggest changes I remember from our second year were for qualifiers. We moved that up a month because some players need to get visas to travel to the U.S. and we want to make it easier for that. I think DEF CON requested that we move the organizers table from the middle of the room to the end of the room for finals. We were a lot better at hiding our booze, so nobody from the hotel yelled at us or chewed us out. I think we were still on ARM again.
You mean you
second.
didn't just bring a keg in and start giving out drinks indiscriminately without realizing that was very explicitly against hotel rules?
So in 2013 we got chewed out because we just kind of looked like we were a bar. Like like one edge of our table was just like a row of booze. And at some point I was like, this is the opposite of what you're allowed to do.
Yeah, a lot of people gave us a hard time about like the outside food stuff and everything, and like until you've run it, you don't realize that's actually super important to the hotel, and it's not us just being jerks because we hate you and we hate you having access to good food. It's the hotel has been very clear, like
they hate you having access to
kind of
good
do
food.
whatever the hell you want, but we want people to spend $12 on the world's worst hot dog, so we can't do that if you let them bring in pizza. And so
we're very familiar with this phenomenon.
We got the same thing actually this last year. It was actually, I think it was actually the first time that had happened to us, but the person who chewed me out was very nice at the end because maybe they saw in my eyes my lack of sleep, and I was like, I barely know what's going on here anyways. And they were like, just tell them to be stealthy. Like, and their point that was interesting is like, look, like our people, are getting tips and stuff, and this is how they make their living, and we want our staff to get all that stuff, and we don't want the staff to be upset when they see people, carrying in pizza boxes. So just be stealthy. I was like,
it's just hard because at that like far east end of Bally's, you're like a 10-minute walk from anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I liked the Rio better for that. They had better food. They kind of gave us a hard time, but eventually I talked to them. I was like, look, if I go to Hash House in your hotel and buy food from there and walk it in, you're really going to tell me that's... No, that's fine. Booze was a big one. Let's see. Other less critical, but still I think important things for year 2. So year 1, we wanted to kind of do like this CTF party. We wanted everybody to kind of get together and talk and hang out and socialize.
The night before the
year
game.
1, we did that before the game. Everybody was super guarded and no one wanted to talk or mingle or anything. So year 2, we're like, let's do it at the end. And so DT provided a keg that was, run through the hotel channels and everything. And we ran the after party after. And I think I really liked what I saw there. Like everybody was kind of socializing. Their guard was way down. People were talking about, sorts of things that happened in the game. Like the interaction Jan described with like, oh, that was you. Like, that wasn't an isolated incident. That happened all there quite a bit there. And I think that was cool. And I think we continued that every year after.
I was just going to say, so you guys actually started that.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that. That's fascinating.
Yeah. It happens every year.
Yeah, and that was inspired by the Concerto Captain's Party. But like we didn't like the idea. Or Captain's Party happened in the middle of the game, and it was limited access. So it was a captain plus 1 or 2 others, and we didn't want a caste system. really. Like, you know, we said we'll only talk to the captains, but that's because there were 8 to 12 of us and what felt like at times 4,000 of you guys. And, you know, just keeping in our head who we told what to and making sure, and, you know, we did, I think, a bad job at policing where inputs came. And so that, you know, had people then like, oh, I'll go ask Vito because he's nice.
Yeah. Vito and Solir have all the answers, and they don't like.
Yeah, Vito and Solir are the suckers. They're super nice, and as long as the database isn't melting, Vito won't tell you to fuck off. Solir won't tell you to fuck off, no matter what. But you know, but then it was hard. Like, that's kind of an attack, though. Like, even having the nice people, it's like we need to control who or what teams have asked what questions and what answers we've given out, so we can make sure that every team knows the same thing and people aren't getting special treatment or privileged information by being chummy with us, and you know, knowing that Vito is the friendly face of the organization.
Yeah.
I feel like year 2 was so much better than year 1.
Yeah. It's for the most part, it was really cumulative, where we learned a lot of lessons, and I feel like we did a pretty okay job at like applying the right lessons. And also a pretty good job at saying no to scope creep, which was a huge thing that really helped us.
In the games, or in the game itself, or the challenges?
In all the above, I think.
Okay.
Like we maintained a Google Drive document that is stuff that we would like to implement at some point in the future, and we ended with that longer than it's ever been.
Yeah. And sometimes it's
I'd say we're very bad at that. Jan is very good about, one of his strengths is getting you super stoked about an idea. And one of my strengths is trying to push back against that when we need to get shit that actually works. And so we try to find the right balance. It doesn't always go the correct way in both directions.
And it worked out with Stealth Ports, for example. I think Stealth Ports, we had a very serious go, no-go conversation where...
Oh, because I had to tell you, that's when we thought we had problems with Stealth Ports, and I started looking at the code last year, or at the last DEF CON finals, and I'm like, I don't remember writing any of this code. I must have been blackout pandemic drunk or something. And I'm just like, none of this looks familiar. And I'm like, it's that feeling where you're like, it doesn't even really look like mine. Like, and then I finally did a Git blame. I'm like, this is Jan's code. That's
right.
That's why.
That's right.
And then I flashed because
okay, if you're not going to do it,
yeah, he really wanted these stealth ports. And I'm like, dude, I cannot do the challenge and host our first virtual game and everything, and also do the stealth ports idea. Like, you're gonna have to find somebody to do it, and he did it.
But
see, and I had that the deja vu, who wrote this code? Looking at, I think it was our flag redistribution code. Every year we had a finite number of flags in the game, and if you're a team that just kind of circled the drain, you ended the game with some low number of flags. And after the first year, I felt like that code wasn't working right, so I rewrote it, and it was the same experience. Who wrote this? How does this work? And it was, exactly the experience where you type git blame to see whose fault it is, and it's git blame only tells you it's your fault.
yeah.
I legitimately, I don't want to downplay anybody's experiences, but I felt like what was to me PTSD with our patching code, because it was an automated patching system that was not ready the first day that we've launched, that me and Yannick, after staying up all Thursday night to get things working for Friday, we also spent all Saturday night trying to get things working. Got it stable at 3 or 4 a.m., left to go back to the room to sleep for 3 hours, woke up, came back, plugged in, and we thankfully were like, let's test it during the game. Of course, it was our first year. We were idiots. We didn't have a test team. So we had to test it with real teams, which then we would wipe the database and go. And we test it really in production, and it does not work. And so we're just poring over this script, trying to figure it out for 20 minutes. Jan's like, Adam, we have to start the game. I'm like, we can't start the game if we don't have patching. I have to start the game. The teams are here. There's nothing we can do. And I'm like, but we're using a team. We can't let them and we start yelling at each other. He goes away and then figures out they can release a challenge so that the teams have something to work on, even if they can't access the game. He does that. We finally fixed the bug. It was the stupidest bug. I still remember it, but that's not important. fix the bug, deploy it. It works great. And literally the next year when I had to go back at that code, it was one of the worst feelings. But the thing that I did was like, I'm going to test the shit out of this code. Like that thing has 100% test coverage, and I made it beautiful. And oh God, but it was so painful going back to that code, like, because I remembered all those horrible memories of trying to get it to work.
I think one time that we really defended against scope creep was we wanted to do a heads-up tournament our second year. It would have been one of the
third year pandemic, I think. Or sorry,
Really?
Go ahead. I mean, I don't know which story you're
second year.
going. We tried this several times and several
Yeah,
different
we
ways.
tried several times, and it just never. There was never bandwidth for it.
Well, the second year we wanted to do dunk tanks. We've always wanted to do dunk tanks, as we saw that
I
was
remember that from the proposal.
that was in our proposal, and it was something that we brought up every single year. And the second year we did check and see,
tried.
like
Yeah.
the logistics wise, can we make it work? And it was like, no, the hotel won't allow it based on liability. But it's like, could we do a dunk tank full of like
Gel.
like what are those balls? No, the ball.
Oh, the balls,
gels,
yeah,
man.
Oh yeah, the ball pit.
Yeah, like a ball pit balls, and like that's kind of lame. That really defeats the purpose. Like, what if we put the dunk tanks outside and we had cameras that streamed this inside the event? And we're just like, no, and like it didn't work the second year, and the third year we even were like, okay, since it's COVID, what if we did a virtual dunk tank? So it would be like a game where your character is looking at the screen and they're in a virtual dunk tank and you have to hack something and the first person dunks the other person virtually. And I actually started on that for a couple weeks, I think. I got a demo-ish working, but I know nothing about Unreal Engine. Like, I'm just trying to do this stuff. At a certain point, I just be like, Jan, I don't think this is going to fly, man. Like, I don't think I can actually do this.
I think there's that saying, done is better than perfect, and applies to cutting shit until you have a product, a game that you can actually run. How about?
I think year 2 was also the first year we did, like, and it was terrible in comparison to what we ended with, but we did an attempt at visualization of game state. That was the D3JS, like, boxes and
Yes.
lines and dots that Hoju made prettier, but we're like, let's get rid of the static scoreboard. Like, I think I remember even in like the very early things, I wanted like the scoreboard to be animated, or like when teams changed positions, I wanted like some animation to occur to make it more dramatic than just like, oh, blink and you missed it. But I think that was right, because that was purple and pink and orange, so that would have been our second year.
Yeah, and that was the year we were at the end of the ballroom in the Rio, because there were couches, like just the two of the like tiniest couches in the world compared to the size of that room, and there would be people hanging out there just watching the visualization. It was extremely cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah, those are good moments when I think we had a good situation with Doom where people would just sit and like watch people glitch through walls and stuff.
Yeah, I think at a high level, we never really cracked the nut of making the game itself visualizable or interesting.
Just individual challenges.
Exactly, yeah. I think that what we found is if we can make individual challenges have some type of visualization component, like when we did Dropship, so you could actually see the game that the people were playing, I think that helped a lot in attracting people. Or even last year, I think with Baba Is You, I think it wasn't necessarily visualization.
Zero
It
Is
was
You,
more
yeah.
like, or Zero Is You, but people could actually like play.
Yeah, I think stuff like that's super cool. Like, I think thinking about memory corruption not as long character strings as responses to what's your name, but rather like, oh, it turns out that if you have this font designed this way with this type of curve, you can actually you write over memory with the geometry under that curve, and then trying to visualize like, oh, here's an exploit, and I'm going to write out the word pwned using this. Like, I think thinking about exploits in the context of the application that they are, and how that visualizes, I think that's super interesting, but I don't have a great idea on how to do that generically.
So, what about the rest of your year? So year 1 was insane, and well, for us for sure, but it sounds like you had minor hurdles as well, learning experiences. Year 2 went smooth sailing, and then you became seasoned organizers, and everything else was easy?
I don't think year 2 was smooth sailing. Like there were, I don't know if there were issues with the Odroids or something, but like I know Salir spent like the better part of a day just wrestling with these, machines that kept kernel panicking, and we weren't sure it was like a team fault. I'm seeing a lot of chuckling, so that was Shellfish, wasn't it?
I don't know. No. The hilarious thing is, this is exactly Jan and I's relationship. Like, towards the end of each day or the end of the CTF, he'd be like, Adam, that wasn't that bad. I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? My hair was on fire the whole time. Like, I was tracking down this one issue or this other thing and this report, and it's just like, yeah, it never bubbled up. Like, the big stuff didn't bubble up to you, so you thought everything was going great, but I'm over there in panic mode.
Yeah, there was always this idea that we would cross-train people on other responsibilities, and it just never happened because I can't be cross-trained right now. I'm busy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolutely.
Or, I can't cross-train anybody. I have to add this new functionality that'll be even harder to explain.
Yeah, I feel like year 3 was probably our best year as far as...
There was definitely the most stuff that year. Like, we started with x86 64 Linux. That was the year we had the live CTF event, which was actually, like, I don't hate how that went. We had Windows on ARM, and MIPS as well, right?
Yeah, we had ARM, MIPS, and x86 that year. And I think that was the ELIZA year, because the other thing we did with ELIZA was we re-released it from ARM to MIPS.
Yeah.
That is cool.
Was there a service in year 2 that we redid from x86 and an emulator to ARM between Friday and Saturday?
Maybe.
So I think it was year 2 you had the Badger, and I mean, was it year 2 or year 4? I don't think
that was year 2.
Year 2,
that was absolutely year 2.
And then
year 4 was CGC.
okay, yeah, but I think for year 4 for the quals you had a x86 version of the Badger, like a Badger Redux. That was
because we went in with the idea of having a "there I fixed it" category where we would take. That must have been year 5, but we would take a quals challenge or a previous challenge, fix the bug that everybody had landed, make everybody look for a new one.
Yeah,
God, I loved the Badger challenge.
Badger was amazing.
The Badger rehost, right? You had to turn on X11, or you had to allow X11 from outside, and so we were sitting on infrastructure boxes, just like launching like XIs or like events preview or whatever. Like, here's a picture, here's a GIF we think is funny, and just anybody we could. We're like, yeah,
amazing.
It costs us nothing.
Amazing. Yeah, that was an awesome challenge. Also, I think there are several bugs in the rehost. The one we used was some memory error, right? Probably an overflow on the heap, if I remember correctly. But in the input, like some input form in the Badger, so it was pretty awesome.
I don't think anyone exploited that the way we anticipated.
Maybe everyone found that same, because that was much easier to exploit, I think, than your intended bug.
I think our intended bug was you had the ability to SHA-sum certain memory, but you could provide a range, and that range could go into the flag page. And so if you did a bytewise search, you could leak out the flag data like that.
That's a cool bug.
But I don't think anybody found it.
Yeah, well, once we saw the sec fault from that form, it was everyone there was in.
Year 3, I think, was the year that we had addressable LED strips on every team's
Yes, it was.
And so we had a 3D visualization that year, as well as we would have like the attacks move around the room and flash the tables for like first blood, and just it still wasn't perfect, as we talked about before. It wasn't really a visualization of what's going on with any individual service. It was more just what's the game state. And so our observers could see when interesting things were happening and when the game was just kind of stale. So like they could tell when it was exciting, just they perhaps didn't understand why it was exciting. So I think there's still some interesting work to do there and helping the people who aren't playing understand why what's going on. It's interesting.
Right.
What's actually going on. I don't know if your experience was the same as our experience, but the number of helpful people who came in and explained to their friend what CTF was, but just missed. And like the number of people who would approach me and be like, hey, have you ever heard of Metasploit? Like, I bet people with Metasploit could just win this. I was like, oh.
That's one of the inspirations behind one of our challenges, Dub Dub Dub, that last year. That using Metasploit, you could get
World
pretty
Wide
far
Web.
in Dub Dub
Yeah,
Dub
exactly.
with some awareness wrapped around it.
It was a CTF in a CTF, but yeah.
That was something
and-
that fell down from our proposal, was that we would do web challenges.
Oh yeah. Web is. We got a lot of
It's
shit
so
the last.
it's
year
so hard
especially.
to make a good web attack defense CTF challenge. It's just
attack defense. Specifically.
One year I wanted to run quals with every challenge on port 80, but just
we did that accidentally one year. What was that? Our second year, Jan, where like every service basically had a web front end, and we didn't even really plan it or think about it that way. Or was it second or third year? One year they called it like a fake web CTF, where everything had web terminals, but it was all binaries on the back end. It wasn't even a conscious plan that we had done. It just like that's the way that all the challenges ended up.
it was just funny. I think that actually has some like deep white hatters lower, and I won't dox the individual responsible for it. But at our first DEF CON, somebody was just pointing Internet Explorer at all the service ports, and they're like, "Oh look, I downloaded a file. That must mean I'm onto something." And it was just the standard output. Nothing actually interesting, but just the HTTP request was enough to get past the first
awesome.
gatekeeper and to make it spit out some output.
That's
And,
so amazing.
It was like, let's put everything on 80 and see how many user agents we get.
Oh man, wow.
So, a lot of good times in CTF, and I'm sure we could keep going for hours and hours. But what made you guys make the decision to move on, to pass the game onwards?
My feeling about it was, and we came close to just our last year running quals. We read to this big party house in Central Florida. I think we spent Friday and Saturday night in the pool. Was just everybody was
Isn't the
got a
game
couple
still running
sheets
on
to the-
Saturday night?
Yeah, the game was running great on Saturday night. We were all a couple sheets to the wind. We were hanging out by the pool, like, HJ and Sergoon were, just having fun out there. And we're like, what if we just run it forever? Mm-hmm. And
nobody drowned anybody for suggesting that?
there were a couple of us that were like, well, we don't want to run it forever, but we're also ride or die. But it basically came down to, like, people who were, single at the beginning, people who were really cagey about work at the beginning, went through a lot of, big life changes. People who were single at the beginning ended up married with kids. Mm-hmm. People who were, just kind of working at a job at the beginning were like running a company at the end. And it came down to this can't be our game forever. This can't be our lives forever necessarily. And, we think we've made a big impact. We're, excited to see what'll happen in the future when somebody comes along and just makes us look like complete rank amateurs. And
I'm looking forward to seeing that too.
I'm trying to be nice.
I appreciate
but
that.
no, I think there is, we each have our like time to be creative and our time to be, at some point I don't believe that we necessarily run out of ideas, but we are interested to see what other people will do with this canvas, what other people will do with this, time and opportunity. And it is a little bit sad that I'm, not running it anymore. That first year afterwards at DEF CON, when I did not know what to do with the entire weekend, was, it was a struggle. But at the same time, it's like, no, it's cool. Like, I'm actually able to see the other things. I'm able to not just, hang around at the table that is my job now. I did that this year, actually. But it was, just nice to not have responsibilities at DEF CON and yeah, to go in and see, you know, what's new and exciting instead of being responsible for what's new and exciting.
That last quals was ridiculous. Like, we, I don't remember if there were any problems externally, but I feel like we had running quals down to a science. We spent so much time with, like, I think it was an HTC Vive and VR. We spent time in the pool, like,
We cooked.
and yeah, and like the game wasn't on fire. And I think that was part of the, like, oh yeah, we could just do this forever. Like, we were just hanging out as a bunch of friends in this ridiculous, weird mansion that had a basketball court inside of it.
What?
Interesting.
And like, we all got reasonable sleep. I think a few of us had, you know, alarm clocks every 2 hours just to get up. Like, all the services were up. You know, we had some effectively SLA pollers even for quals that we would run, so that we could attempt to detect if there was an issue with the services and be proactive about it. But yeah, that last year was fun.
Yeah, there's.
Wow.
I can relate to the. I mean, we struggled with that decision too. Like, it's hard to let go. You just.
Oh yeah, Adam's told me all about how much he struggled with that decision.
I struggled a lot.
As a team.
I struggled with planning my dances and how excited I was going to be and who I was going to call first.
How much sleep you're gonna
Do I
get?
start with Despacito or the Macarena?
Yeah, I feel bad. I heard it's my fault that you guys didn't run a
It
fifth
is
year.
100% in the best. And I could have just gone to legitbs.net, seen the DEF CON CTF organizers list, and realized that Jan was incorrect. Yeah, I think we've mentioned it, but basically, Jan got it. Even though in our proposal, if you look at our proposal, we say we're going to run it for 4 years. And somehow we had forgotten that we wrote that. And either after the first year or two, Jan got it into his head that everyone did 5 years of organizing except for one group, which only did 4 years. And so that's what we were operating by. And we were like, all right, we're going to do another 5th year so that we don't embarrass ourselves and only do 4. And then thank God we had dinner with Dustin, and he mentioned that they were the only ones to do 5 and everyone else did 4. And yeah, I almost murdered Jan, but yeah, we're still here and we had to make, you know, team decisions.
I survived. Someone told me when I was talking about this, yeah, but you should do 5 so that we can be as cool as legit BS. And at some point I'm like, no, I'm okay.
Yeah, I
Legit
think,
BS remains
I think
cool
we'll never
if I'm
be
not.
as cool as legit BS. Given what they just said about quals, I don't think we've ever had a quals or an event like that where it was mainly no problems.
You know, finals is always
think the last one went
crazy, but quals, I do feel like we got more and more solid. Where things were always hectic is challenges coming together at the last minute, but the actual
and not getting integrated into infrastructure.
yeah, the actual
especially.
hosting was pretty solid. We ran into a problem with our last quals where there were 2 challenges that I had to jump in and help integration on, and because of that, I had started a complete refactor of my crypto ML challenge because I had some inspiration in the shower, and it interrupted the refactor, and so then I had to pull an all-nighter finishing the refactor after the CTF started. It was insane, but you know, it worked out. Yeah, it's crazy. What's next for you guys?
So for me, I actually still host a CTF, but this time at work.
Now you
Awesome.
get paid for it, not just an adoration
Yeah.
of the community.
Yeah, that part's
Is that what
nice.
that's called? I thought that was called something else. Cool. Okay, so yeah, I think, and the main reason, we love talking to you all, and especially I think the one thing that we really try to do with this podcast is get into like the CTF history, because a lot of this stuff is very ephemeral and kind of just like it's an event that happens and there are these cool challenges and then it kind of just disappears into the ether, and it sticks in people's memories, but especially like the new breed. And this was something that I loved seeing for our last year here, is there were teams that only ever played our DEF CON CTFs over the last 4 years, which is absolutely bonkers to me. Because like Jan said, we grew up playing, the DD Tech, the Ken Shoto, and the legit BS games. And since we're retiring, there's a new call for organizers out there. So what I'd really like to kind of close on is maybe you can talk a bit about, your proposal, how you formed the team, under the kind of general theme of tips for future organizers, because, you've carried this torch, we've carried this torch, and it's really important to the community that people step up and go forward. So what do you have to help them be successful? That was a lot. I don't know if anybody wants to go first.
So I can probably start, and I think my number one thing is start early. Like start as soon as you have like any idea that this might be a thing you need to do. We started our proposal, I think, a full month before the due date, and we kind of just decided it's like, no, we're done. We're not going to let it wait. We're not going to try and like make more edits. We spent, I think, a Saturday and most of a Sunday working on it, and let's ship it. Like.
Yeah.
Awesome.
For a lot of the other stuff, I'm really going to lean on Dustin because he, I think, really took a lot of the leadership, especially early on.
Cool. So, Dustin, can you talk maybe about the insider's perspective on how you formed the Legit BS team and the proposal experience?
Sure, I can take a crack at that. I think I built the bulk of so. A majority of the team came out of that initial club at USF, honestly, right? Salir, Vito, Jambalaya. Who am I forgetting out of there?
I know Jetboy and Hoju joined us later on.
Oh, yeah. But, yes, they also were...
yeah.
Basically, all the people who were in at that first meeting where we did the Learn Security Online thing. And when I saw, we'd actually put a bid together to host when DD Tech won, and that didn't turn out. So it's been a few more years thinking about what it would mean to run it, and it didn't hurt that we won a few times. And so GT knew who we were a bit, but I think when I was really thinking about being serious about running it, I reached out to a few. People I considered very high value. Like I had been working at a REVR sort of shop for a while, and so I knew that I could find people around that office that could help write interesting challenges and understood the state of the art and exploitation and reversing and all these things. But like when I called Vito, I was like, "Hey, I'm thinking about doing this. This is the other side of the coin of what we were staring at when we started the White Hatters, but I need somebody who's a badass at infrastructure and, the web appy sorts of things that run a good quals and such. And you're my guy for that." So, and I did the same thing with Salir for network. When I brought Hoju on, it was, for visualization and sorts of style things. But I had my core team of people who were experts in things that weren't just vulnerability research. Not to say that, these people were slouches in that domain, but I think that's very important. I think a lot of hackers and hackademics think that all the other stuff is trivial, and so if, I can write exploit detect and reverse engineer, right? How hard is it to write a scalable web app that won't fall over when 1,000 people click log in at the start of quals?
Well, it's easy to make them do a proof of work before they can sign in.
But I think having that team of, experts that you can depend on so that you can just think about the challenges of the game and not also have your part-time thing be, the infrastructure that runs everything. I think coming out with some ideas of what you want to change, I think that's important. And don't be afraid to go crazy. Like, DT won't hold you to anything. if it ends up being crazy, but just putting out the crazy ideas, right? OOO was dunk tanks. And it didn't go anywhere, but just showed they were like, let's try to do something to make this into more of a spectacle. I think not losing sight of the fact that you have at least two audiences, right? So you have your competitors, and you should work hard to respect their time. Like I said, they've spent hundreds, if not thousands, of hours honing their craft and becoming good enough, and playing all the other CTFs, and giving up the drinking and the debauchery of DEF CON to sit behind a computer and stare and be frustrated.
Is this what happens at DEF CON when you're not CTFing? I've literally never not CTF'd at DEF CON.
Yeah.
God
yeah,
damn
believe it or not.
All right, I'm looking forward to that next year.
Oh my. Yeah, it's...
I'll just follow Vito and his backpack around.
That's right.
Shit, where was I?
I interrupted you when you were talking about...
Oh yeah, the other audience. So DT cares a lot about the observers and the general attendees of DEF CON. CTF, or the DEF CON CTF, has this sort of mythos around it, and if we're lucky and we get good organizers again, we'll be able to keep that mythos. But a big part of that mythos is that the people who aren't competing are able to come by and understand that something interesting is going on in there, and being willing and able to spend time. I think we had some explainer videos made, and we'd basically, like, every hour or two when we were hosting, we'd have one of the Legit BS folk go and just basically hold court and say, hey everybody, it looks like we've got a lot of people in here. This is DEF CON CTF, and just kind of give the rundown to let people know what exactly was going on, and trying to combat that sort of like, oh, this is there's this cool tool called Metasploit, and that's how these guys are winning. But I think keeping in mind that you've also got to cater to that second audience, if we want to keep the sort of mythos of the DEF CON CTF alive and well. I think that's important as well.
Awesome.
And I think it's interesting to see a lot of that approach to both the technical content and also a very audience-friendly thing. We see that at I see that at a lot of other contests at DEF CON. So the car hacking CTF is kind of impressive. Where you have, even during, like, this year during COVID, there were people at tables, and there were, a couple cars, one that had, like, gaff tape over these little oval logos at the front and back, so you didn't know that it was a Ford EcoSport. There's another, like, weird electric car covered in stickers, and just the visual of seeing somebody at one of the tables go like, yes, every time that, like, a window on the car would move because they controlled it remotely was really, really cool. And, figuring out a way to do that in a more, like, hardcore, CTF. I don't actually know if the car hacking CTF is super hardcore or not, but in, just a more pure binary CTF. And, maybe web challenges in the future. We'll see, because a lot of people want those.
Got to give the people what they want.
I guess.
Awesome. Well, maybe. I don't know. Somebody else can deal with that. Not
exactly.
us.
Not a problem. We're definitely support role at best next year.
Yes.
Which will be good.
Yeah. Very happy to support. And, I'm sure we do this the same as you, right? We love CTFs. We love the community. And that's why we were willing to donate our time, money, and energy. More important, I guess, energy to DEF CON CTF.
Yeah, it's an amazing experience. If you think playing it is difficult, imagine running it. It's an incredibly rewarding experience, and it's a ton of fun. There's really nothing else like it. It was a wonderful time. It's one of those bittersweet things where, like flying home from DEF CON in 2017 and then to Netherlands like the next day after that. I think I listened to Good Riddance by Green Day about 40 times each day. Just like, sad it's over, but also, what's next?
Mm-hmm.
I still get goosebumps whenever I hear Final
Fantasy. Yeah.
I love it. Yeah.
One of the few sentimental items I actually have on my desk are our DEF CON challenge coins from the various years. And then one of the sentimental things I have on my office desk at the university is the challenge coins we received during the legit BS years.
Yeah, my CTF swag isn't my, video chat background by coincidence, I assure you.
Yeah, it really pales in comparison to the little pendant. I don't even have push pins here. I asked Jan to bring them when we recorded our last episode. He did not, so it's just chilling on the couch. Very sad. But yeah, I also have my good luck charm throughout the last 3 years that we hosted was my coin from the first year, where I was like, look, and I would carry that with me. Be like, look, if we survive the first year, we can survive literally anything. So it's a good feeling there. Cool. Any remaining thoughts? Anything you want to plug or share or otherwise? You have a hopefully captive, hacking audience who are looking up to you as the gods that you are.
Honestly, I just want to see some really good proposals come through for DEF CON CTF next year. I know there's got to be a handful out there. I'm excited to read them and excited to see what the future of DEF CON CTF is. If you're on the fence about it, give it a shot. It might take you some time to write the proposal, might, require you to, get, really close to a bunch of friends over the next few years. But it's a lovely, wonderful time. And I believe you can do it.
Awesome. Yeah, and I think actually the friendship among the team, of the organizing team, is something that I didn't necessarily expect going in, because we were already friends and we knew everybody. But it was actually one of the saddest things about when we retired on the hybrid year, because all of our team wasn't able to be in person, so we didn't get to share, that last experience. And that was, for me, that was, I think, the only big thing that, was my big thing of like, well, maybe we could do one more year, because it would be great to retire altogether. But I think I was like, well, I'm not guaranteed that. So, yeah. And Dustin, any final thoughts or pieces of advice?
Yeah, I'm with Vito on this. If you're on the fence about doing it, just fucking do it. We had run one incredibly amateur CTF prior to hosting DEF CON, and I think we overcame that, and I feel like we did at least an adequate job when we hosted. I don't think that DEF CON is expecting perfection the first year or even the
fifth year,
the last year you run it. But I think as long as you're honest about what's going on and communicative with your teams, it's a small community. We all know how computers work and don't work, and I think getting out in front of it and doing it and making mistakes and learning from them, and coming back with that knowledge next year and kicking it up a level, I think is entirely attainable for most groups. So if you want to do it, just do it.
Great. Well, on the Nike, if you want to sponsor us, please send us some money and we'll say just do it all the time.
We gave Nike way too much money our last few years.
Oh, did you?
but I will say the running shoes are also a good choice for DEF CON. They're very gotta wear running shoes. Like the basketball shoes, I'm gonna not plug a brand necessarily. The basketball shoes look cool, but the running shoes, you put on miles during DEF CON.
I think I wore Chucks every time, and I think you are correct.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I made a mistake, but
yeah, Vito always used a certain well-known sneaker manufacturer's customization program. So we had some slick ass purple and gold legit BS themed shoes.
That's
to wear
cool.
around. And I still wear those when I've got a really big meeting or something, and I was like, yeah, I need to feel like I own the room. That puts me right back in standing up to the microphone and getting ready to drone on attention teams and say my piece. So
amazing. Great. Well, thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate it. Our special guests, Dustin and Vito from Legit BS. I'm Adam D. You can find me on Twitter at Adam Dupay. He is Zardis. You can find him on Twitter at Zardis. Together we are CTF Radiooo. And you can find us online on YouTube or Twitter at CTF Radiooo. You can send us questions through email, ctfradio@gmail.com, where we've actually got some really good feedback from people that we're going to try to incorporate into future episodes. So, yeah, we really appreciate that. So take care and happy hacking.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks for the time. Enjoy the rest of your
Thank
day.
you, guys.
Later.
Bye, everyone.